Well, and I think it's really interesting to see because one of the things that I did before I even thought about, having a child was talking to those that I respect in the workplace that were in positions where I'm like, oh, I would love to be in that role one day. I want to get some advice. And it was kind of that older mentality of hide who you
Mhm.
are. You
Yeah.
don't have kids. You have to kind of keep up with your male counterparts and
Mhm.
you don't want anything to kind of change that mindset for anyone in the room by
Right.
then putting you into this box of motherhood.
Yeah.
And I think that still exists. I think we're getting better. We're getting better. I'm
Getting
I'm
better.
really
Yeah.
excited to see. I'm very passionate about Gen Z and what they will bring because they're not willing to just stop and say, okay,
No.
I'm going to do what you're doing before.
Hi there, and welcome to the HR podcast. This is Linda Misegadis
and Cyndi Manuel, and we'll be your co-hosts. After spending years working in and with HR, we thought, why not start a podcast to support the important HR community? We believe the way things have always been done isn't necessarily what's going to work in the future. So we're diving into topics that support HR and working women as they navigate the future of work. We're talking about professional growth and also how we can support each other as human beings.
We can't wait to bring you insights from HR experts, thought leaders, and inspiring women who are making a real difference in their organization and communities. They'll share their journeys and tips on balancing work and life in a better way. We're excited to learn alongside you and hope you'll pick up some great takeaways from tips and tricks to worksheets that you can actually use in your daily life. So grab your favorite beverage
or lace up your walking shoes and join us for the HR Her Resources podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Her Resources podcast. I'm happy to be back in the studio with my friend and co-host Cyndi Manuel. How are you?
I'm doing great. I was kind of thinking about having Priya back today and realized that it's kind of a cool time for us because it was about this time last year that we started to record the Her Resources podcast.
That's
put them
right.
out in like September in the fall, but we started recording in the summer. So happy 1-year anniversary, friend.
Happy 1-year anniversary.
So
How
cool.
cool is that? I know. I wish I had balloons or something. That is so awesome. Well, it has been a fun ride for sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. I've enjoyed every second of it. So, and we are excited to have back in the studio with us Priya Shah. And we're going to be talking about something that's near and dear to us for sure, but something that I'm sure is near and dear to many of our listeners out there about working moms. And so, Cyndi, why don't you introduce Priya to everyone?
Yeah, so you're right. Today, we're going to celebrate strength, the resilience, and the value that working moms bring. I think a lot of times, there are some misconceptions that working moms are distracted or less committed and that they may not want growth opportunities. And Priya is a very good example of someone who definitely has grown tremendously as a mom. I also always think, there's so many transferable skills that moms have, time management, prioritization, because we always have to do more with less, right? Empathy and emotional intelligence, resilience under pressure. You have to be calm in the chaos, which I know a lot of us can associate with. And then perspective and purpose, values-driven decision making. So super.
That's so true. And Cyndi, I never thought about any of that stuff until just the last few years, where that's actually kind of been talked about more as we were, especially around the world of skills-based hiring, and then also like the gap years and for women in the workforce, and really starting to think about that all of those things you just talked about, those transferable skills, like they're way undervalued and something that no one ever thinks about. And so I'm so glad we're highlighting that. But without further ado, I want to get with
super
Priya
excited.
For sure.
So yes, sorry. I just had to give that little
I know, I'm
intro.
so glad you did. It was a great way to set the stage.
Super excited. Yeah. So I want to welcome back to the HR podcast, Priya Shah. Welcome back. Priya has spent over 15 years leading integrated marketing communication strategies and high impact programs for the B2B, consumer, and nonprofit sectors, both at communications agencies and in global matrix environments. With her experience working with corporate and startup clients, she established Shah Squared Consulting to leverage brand messaging and social media strategies, helping businesses drive success. She's passionate about using a people-first approach and created the Shah Squared Communications Model, SCM, a proprietary 5-stage framework designed to strengthen brands, empower teams, and make a significant impact by leveraging social media. Her method combines engaging storytelling, which I love, and data-driven insights, which Linda loves, to promote authentic connections across the digital landscape. She's based in Denver and is the co-lead of the International Association of Business Communications, IABC, Consultant Special Interest Group. Excuse me, I'm all choked up. She serves on the Women in Leadership Council at the Workforce Institute and is a distinguished Toastmaster. Congratulations. She holds a master's degree from Boston University and has a bachelor's degree in journalism from Iowa State University. And she's listed in Marquis Who's Who in America. Wow. Welcome to back to the podcast.
Back to the podcast. Yeah.
Thank you both.
Yeah.
I'm very excited to be here and very excited for the topic that we're about to embark on.
I love
very important topic.
Yeah. So let's just kick it off. Like, what has being a working mom meant to you then, Priya?
You know, it's kind of been an evolution. And I think this happens to a lot of women. I had my first child 21 months ago, which is hard to believe.
It's
but
adorable.
I think, thank you. It's really one of those where you don't know until you're in it. And I really, really, truly believe that, where I came in with my own preconceived notions of what it would be. All of that's been thrown out the window of what reality actually is. But I think, as somebody who has always been very career driven, I didn't know what would happen and I didn't know what it would mean. And so I really didn't experience the benefits or really think about the benefits until I was a few months in. And I was realizing I was resorting back to old habits. I was resorting back to who I was before, which that person doesn't exist anymore. That is just a piece of my past. And so I think what motherhood opened up for me was a whole other perspective on where I'm at right now in my life and what needs to be kind of my priorities. And it brought me back to my values. I know we've talked about authenticity. It really brought all of those pieces back to me. And I think essentially made me just stronger in general as a leader of just really thinking about the journey I've been on, not just with motherhood, but throughout my career. It just kind of gave me that perspective.
Well, and just to kind of create a little perspective for everyone too, there's approximately 30.76 million working moms in the US, and over 70% of working mothers with children under 18 are between the ages of 30 and 49. And as of February 2025, the labor force participation rate for women in the US is 57.5%. It's slightly down from 58% in 2021, but still, it just kind of shows, just for perspective, the number of women that are in the workforce today. And of course, a good portion of those women are mothers.
I love that. And
Yeah.
I love what you said too, Priya, about it sort of shapes your value, right? I mean, not that you didn't have values before, but boy, I know when I became a mom for the first time, I've got 2 kids, but when I became a mom, it really shaped my perspective on life in general and definitely on work. At the time I had my son years ago, I was in the retail industry and I thought once he came along, I need more of like a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 5 job. And that really actually was what catapulted me into my career that I'm in today, so many years later. So, and Linda, I'm sure you've had, experiences where being a mom has sort of shaped the way that you approach work as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think, it's one of the things, and I think part of it is just being a woman. But I think also having a layer of being a mom also comes into play. But I think that for us too, it helps us look at things through a different lens. I think the level of empathy women have is generally much higher, which is certainly important, especially when we talk about authenticity in leadership, right? Is that you have to have a level of self awareness. There has to be humility. I mean, being a mom, boy, there's a lot of humility in being a mom. So it's. I think that it does. It really helps. But I do think that women in the workplace, mothers in the workplace, are viewed differently today as well than they were when our kids were little, Cyndi, because the work world has changed, and the level of acceptance, HR policies, things that make it a lot easier for a woman to be a mother, kind of helps a little bit. I mean, it's not perfect, but I will say it's much different because for those of us coming up in a different generation, oftentimes you almost needed to hide the fact you even were a mom. So the fact that it's more widely accepted that women actually do are mothers and have dual responsibilities, I think, has come a long way. But I'm curious, Priya, what do you think about that? Because you're a mom in this new time. I mean, I might be full of baloney. You might have a totally different perspective on that. So
Well, and I think it's really interesting to see because one of the things that I did before I even thought about, having a child was talking to those that I respect in the workplace that were in positions where I'm like, oh, I would love to be in that role one day. I want to get some advice. And it was kind of that older mentality of hide who you
mhm.
are. You
Yeah.
don't have kids. You have to kind of keep up with your male counterparts and
Mhm.
you don't want anything to kind of change that mindset for anyone in the room by
Right.
then putting you into this box of motherhood.
Yeah.
And I think that still exists. I think we're getting better. We're getting better. I'm
Getting
I'm
better.
really
Yeah.
excited to see. I'm very passionate about Gen Z and what they will bring because they're not willing to just stop and say, okay,
No.
I'm going to do what you're doing before. They are changing the game. So I think it's going to continue to evolve and definitely get better. But I think it still
Yeah.
exists. I think we still have that. And I think it really depends on where you are in your career because we also have to realize women
Good
like
point.
me, I mean, I was, I hate to say this, but, I was a geriatric pregnancy. Why do we still say that?
I
What a
I
terrible
hate
word
that.
to
I
use, right?
know.
Yeah.
Geriatric pregnancy.
So I think it's also interesting because women are having children later in life.
That's right.
They
And
are. That's
so
true.
it's also where you're at in your career when you're having a child.
Right.
I think it hits you a little bit different because you have more responsibility in the workplace or you're managing a whole
Right.
team of
You're
people.
already into your
And
journey. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it makes a good point. Well, and I have to be honest, I do think that, like, as much as I think Sheryl Sandberg has got some good things to say, I think the Lean In movement set us back a little bit because it set the wrong expectations for women and for mothers, and this whole notion that, we can do it all and we should be able to do it all. And I think that's a noble concept behind all of that, but that only adds to the enormous amount of pressure we already are feeling. And now you have someone who is in a much different financial position, who is able to, utilize help to come in. So it's not really, that they're doing it all on their own. They bring a lot to the table, and so I do think that movements like that, or even when I see some of the women out there who are, and we had a guest on a podcast recently. And that episode's going to air here soon. But she said, I'm not trying to be a man. I don't want to be equal to a man. I want to be treated as a woman. I want to be viewed as a woman, and I want my needs to be met as a woman, not how does that compare to a
How
man
do I
in the
fit
workforce.
into
And
that? Yeah.
yeah,
Right. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I think those are all really good points. So thanks for sharing that with us because I think that that's an important perspective. Sometimes we think things are so much more advanced, but we're not living in the moment like you are. So that's really great perspective.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that's been interesting, especially with, coming from a parental leave situation, is that being the term now. And
Yeah.
it being something where I very much so pride the companies that give men the time off in the same way
As
that
well, they
women
should.
get time off.
It's
Because
Yes.
yes,
there.
they
It's
should
a
100%.
partnership. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
just the mom.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely, I love
I
that
love
too.
that.
Yeah. What misconceptions have you faced being a mom in the workplace?
I definitely, kind of going back to what Linda was saying with that older mentality, it still exists of, you don't necessarily have the same growth ambitions, that
Yep.
this isn't even something we're going to even offer you because you're in that stage now, or this is probably not the right time, and making decisions
For
for
you.
you
Yes.
without giving you the
Yes. Oh my gosh.
You're like,
That
ask me.
happens so often.
Yeah.
Yes.
Don't make
How much more does
assumptions.
that happen to women than men, too? That's another thing that I think is really fascinating. I was just talking to one of my colleagues about that. We're in some transitions in our organization, and there are all these conversations being had around her because she's a valuable resource to the organization, but no one's talking to her about what does she want, what's important to her. And I thought,
Sit
gosh,
down
why
with
do they do
someone.
that?
Yes.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
That's
Yeah.
where
Talk
HR
to the
comes in
person.
again, right? I mean,
That's where HR
that's such
comes in.
a key
Yeah.
role for HR is to facilitate that conversation. Priya, where do you see
Absolutely.
yourself in the organization? You've got such great skills. Here are some of the needs that the organization has. How can we partner those up? You can
I
make your own
agree.
decision,
yes.
you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that it does come down to just literally asking.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
think, yeah, and I think also just thinking about it from the way that I experienced it, it's probably don't ask when they first return.
Oh
That
my
that is
goodness.
not the
Yes.
time
Right.
because I didn't even know
Yeah.
what was going on
No
at that
sleep.
time.
Yeah.
I'm barely sleeping. I don't know what's
Right.
happening,
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
from the day to day. But give me 3 months in, and I was able to kind of grasp that new element of life, really thinking about what I wanted to do, and actually, that was when I feel like I really embraced it, and it opened up my eyes to all of those other components that you were talking about, Cindy, at the beginning of really where do I wanna go? And I think that's the best time to ask because it could be for some women, "Oh, I really do wanna take a little bit of a
Yeah. Which
breather."
is
That
totally okay too. Yeah.
Absolutely.
100%, but it could also say, "I have this little person. I wanna build a legacy. I'm ready to go, and here we
Uh,
are."
yeah.
No, I totally agree. I love that. What do you think about? I think in the world we live in today, too, that is even before COVID, that created hybrid work environments. So, I mean, COVID certainly increased the amount, but hybrid workforces have been around for a long time. How do you deal, or have you even faced the stigma too of this notion that if you're a mom and you're working from home, then all you're doing is mom duty, right? You couldn't possibly be working all day long
Good
because
question.
you're probably just taking care of the kids. How do you deal with that sort of thing?
Well, and I love that it did become more normalized with COVID because I know we have our own issues that we're dealing with right now with return to office, but I do love the fact that it wasn't a gendered decision. It was very much so
Yeah.
equal, that you
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
it both sides. And so on all sides. And I think really what it comes down to is when you are at home, if whether your office is in the house and whatever part of the house, you're there to work. And I think some people, I was one of those, actually work better at home than I do
Hmm.
Same.
when I'm in an office. I have so many distractions. I can easily, grab coffee 6, 7 times a day and be
Yeah.
hyper caffeinated because it's easy to do that and to kind of say, oh, there's the break room. Oh, there's that place, that place. And I think instead, focusing on the fact that it's not just women, it's everyone that is usually in these more flexible hybrid situations. So it's not about, okay, you're in the home, so you're going to be doing a load of laundry while you're then doing the dishwasher and all these things on a call
Right.
with your AirPods in. No, that's not,
Right.
that's not what's happening behind the scenes. And I think, acknowledging it from the other side, I think it's created a lot of challenges for people that can't turn it off because it's right there.
Yes.
And so I think, it's really about healthy boundaries, that prioritization, those skills that we're learning or have learned as moms, bringing that back into the hybrid workplace because it works both ways of, people thinking you're not working enough and then the reality being you're actually working more.
So,
No,
uh,
that's so true. Well, and just real quick, Cyndi, in 2023, 45% of mothers were the primary breadwinners in their households, and additional 25% were co-breadwinners, meaning, they're contributing significantly to the household income. And 69% of Black mothers are the breadwinners for their families, which is just, I mean, just goes to show just the importance, because we don't live in a world today where it's a single income home, and the women can just stay home and take care of the children and the house while their husbands go off to work. I mean, the dynamics have changed significantly as far as the role that women play in supporting households as well.
and a follow-on question to what you were saying before too, Priya, is you bring up a really kind of good point that we've talked about before, and that is the misconception of balance. So how do you sort of balance, which there's no such thing, I think, kind of maybe depends on the day, right? But how do you balance, Priya, your motherhood, because
Good
you've got a
question.
little one, with work?
What I've really, it comes down to those boundaries. And I've had to also realize as I've returned back to entrepreneurship, which I think is one of the golden elements of being a mom, is being able to have the ability to set your own schedule is very nice, I will say. But also realizing, when do I get the best work done? When am I most productive? So I've had to have that inward conversation and do that self-awareness activity so that I think I'm able to really set better boundaries for myself of saying, okay, I know that I'm most productive in the morning. It's just how I've always been. And so I set the hard line of saying, okay, I shut down at this time. And I truly shut down. I'm not going to check my email. I'm going to be fully engaged because it helps me not only be present with my son, but it also helps me from a mental health perspective, let it go and not feel like I'm always on, because that's what kind of exhausted me most of the time was, we have our email on our phone and then the office is in our house, and it's very tempting.
Yeah.
Very tempting.
Yep.
And so it really is those hardline boundaries, understanding my most productive times and really being present when I'm present. And that means present at work. And that also means present in, during family time, during my, workout, whatever it might be. I've become more intentional.
I love that. What are some ways that you think we kind of just talked about HR and HR supporting some of these conversations, but what are some other things that you think HR and leaders and organizations can do to support working mothers?
I definitely think, continuing this path of flexibility, continuing to be able to have that hybrid workplace be the norm. I think that is a really good way to do it because then it doesn't stigmatize anyone. I think it just, like I said, it was that level playing field. So I think, that's the other thing is that we don't want to be called out on the other side either of, okay, oh, well, we're doing all these policies for these working moms. And then it gives you that other side of stigma where I think that's when you do kind of push harder and you just are exhausted because you are trying to do the I can have it all method. So I think, just being very careful about how you roll out some of these things and the terminology that's being used when you are rolling it out as being more so a benefit to everyone, particularly with some of these, workplace changes. But I also think it does come down to those conversations and making sure that is part of not just looking at parental leave as being that time that they are gone, but thinking about what do you do for the lead up to it? What do you do when they return? And then also realizing the different stages I mean, you both are in very different stages than I am, but
Yeah.
you've gone through how different it is in all of the different stages of being a mom because yes, you're very, very much so involved in those early stages, but it kind of has this like ebb and flow. And so I think just making sure that communication is flowing and that it's just kind of part of the norm. It's not just, oh, we have our annual review and that's it. Maybe a midterm little check in. I think it's really helping to equip those managers with the skill set to know what questions to ask when they're having regular check ins so that a lot of these things don't just go missed to the point where women are just really frustrated and they don't feel comfortable enough to say anything that either they burn out and they leave or they're going to somewhere else where those policies already exist and they already have that as standard operating procedure.
At the Delta Principle, we are transforming the way you experience change. Have you ever experienced an organizational change where your employees pushed back because it was too much, too fast, or they just didn't understand why they couldn't do things the way they've always done them? What about where communication was non-existent or unorganized, with important updates getting lost in the shuffle, leaving people confused? And have you ever experienced change where morale was at an all-time low because the change felt overwhelming and not aligned with your organization's culture? If you are being asked to lead an important organizational change, especially if you're new to leading change, or if you're just feeling overwhelmed, the Delta Principle is here to support you. We work closely with you as a trusted partner, co-creating real-world solutions to address your unique challenges, and we equip you and your organization for future success. Are you gearing up for your next transformation journey or exploring ways to strengthen your change management skills? Then let's connect. This year, we're thrilled to introduce Leading Change, a training designed for leaders driving organizational initiatives, and Navigating Change, a training tailored to empower teams and adapting to change with confidence. Our coaching and training sessions are fully customizable to meet your organization's unique needs. Reach out today to see how we can partner with you to make your next change a success. You can find us on LinkedIn or by emailing us at info@thedeltaprinciple.com.
One of the things that I'm curious about, and because this actually is relevant to both of you as small business owners, as entrepreneurs, one of the challenges I think that we face is that oftentimes the burden falls to the employer to figure out how they're going to fund this. And as a small employer, small business, oftentimes that puts a real burden on them as the employer to figure out how are they going to support a person while they're out, especially if you're talking about any type of paid leave where it's not just job protection under FMLA, but also, thinking about how do you offer those types of benefits in those environments, I think can make things really challenging and can also put people in a position where they have to rethink whether or not they can take the time up. I know when both of my kids were born, when I worked for smaller companies at the time, there was no leave. There was not even job protection. I mean, because they weren't qualified under FMLA. And so, it puts you in a position as a parent, as an employer. I mean, so it is challenging. So I am kind of curious, like, what are both of your thoughts? Because you're both small business owners. If you were thinking about that and you had employees who perhaps were in that situation, what do you do, or what advice do you give to those employers out there and try to help, support during that time as well?
Yeah. So
Cindy, go, because my model's a little bit different than some of the other business models.
curious to hear your model, Priya.
Yeah.
I kind of go back to the episode that we had with Christine Burns one day, where she talked about how she really encourages moms and women, and so I think for me anyway, I love the approach that Christine takes, where it's like, okay, what needs to get done for the business? Who's the best person to be in that role? And then if that's someone who is going to have a family, I'm going to allow that person, I'm going to figure out around the timeline for that person because we're figuring that out, right? But again, conversation with them, figuring out like what is the plan, so that they know what to expect. I know what to expect as a business owner. If there's partners or clients, they know what to expect as well. I definitely think it is doable and worth doing. So, and I'm small enough where I, don't have FMLA or short-term disability or what have you, but FMLA is unpaid, right? So I'm still going to give that person the opportunity to go and do what they, to spend time with their new person, their new little person, so that then they come back to work and they're happier and we'll figure out their schedule once they're back and things of that nature. So it is doable. Priya, what do you do?
Yeah.
You said you have a model.
So that's why I said my model's a little bit different because I definitely do more of like a subcontract model. So I don't have employees, so we wouldn't have the benefit side.
Mhm.
But I do really think, one thing that happened to me, and I think this happens to a lot of women, I was really itching to go back to work at one point where I felt like I was a little bit, my brain was a little mushy.
Yeah.
I was like, I just want to talk to a human who could
And
speak
adult.
words, and
Yes.
I want that too. And, I have, I have to be honest, I wanted to go back. By the time it was over, I was ready. And I think I had been for probably a month before I even went back. And so I think also looking at what do we want to do where it's maybe not a full-time return and really talking
Yes.
about that journey. Because for some people, it might be even after 2 months, they're ready to take on some hours, and easing them back in, I think, is a really nice way to do it too.
And again, having that
I like that.
conversation to say what will work for you is, hey, as soon as you want to come back and do some work with me again, I would love that. So yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's a really good point. I mean, and I do think what I hope we start to see is more and more states having a subsidized paid parental leave, which also helps the small business owner in those situations as well. To try to find that balance so that because you also, in many cases, you don't want to lose that employee
That's right.
either, right? So if you've got this stellar employee and then you don't want that person to feel bad about the fact that they're starting a family. And so it's a lot. But I like what you said, Cyndi. I think it's possible. Anything is possible if you want to put the time and the thought and the energy behind it. You can come up with solutions that work. It may not be, cookie cutter to what corporate America offers, but it certainly there is the opportunity to improve on that. But I'm curious from your perspective, Priya, less and less women are having babies these days. So women, we're seeing we've actually even seen a decline in the population, which is fascinating to me as well. What do you think is driving that, aside from some of the maybe political components that we hear around these things? But what do you think is driving women to make the choice not to start families or to have children?
Sure. And to be fully transparent, I didn't know if I wanted to. It was not
That's fair.
necessarily. It
Yeah.
wasn't necessarily something that I had as a firm line on on my plan. And really, I think what it's coming down to, and I've even talked to my friends, I think part of it is expense. It is really
My
expensive
goodness.
to have
Yes, it
a
is.
child, especially those early years when, they're
Yeah.
not in public school. You're funding all of this on your own. And it does come back to that dual income household and why we're seeing those trends and those changes. But I think it also is because we have, and, we're very far from, I think, where we should be, but we have empowered women and we're
Yep.
watching them get college degrees and go on to have really strong ambition and drive of where they want to be in their career. And I think they probably took the same pause that I did when I was like, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to take this time off? What is it going to do? And a little bit of fear of what is this new life going to be? Because there is this other element of that attraction of, okay, I have disposable income. I can head out at any time and do all of these things and I don't have to plan
Right.
behind it. And I've had friends like that, but I've also seen it on the other side where I think this is also happening. It's kind of going to be kind of interesting to see when these stats come out. But I think a lot of women that have waited then get to a point where they maybe made the decision, oh, I don't want to have kids. and then they do want to have kids, but at this
Right.
point they're in their late 30s, they're in their 40s, and
Geriatric.
it's not easy. And it's
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. Those geriatric patients. That's it.
I think that's a really good point, Priya. And first of all, I want to applaud I want to applaud people who do give it that much thought, because
Yeah.
when I had my first child, I hadn't given it a whole lot of thought. You're married, you're going to have kids. It was like, here's what you're supposed to do. That was years ago. I love that now, millennials, and I'm sure Gen Z will be this way as well. It's more intentional. Do I want to have a family? Do I want to have a partner? Do I want to, what does that mean for my life? Or do I not want to? Or do I not know right now? I was listening to a podcast the other day. She and her husband don't want a child right now. And I think she's probably mid-30s, but they have frozen eggs so that they can make that decision over the next handful of years. So I think that's fascinating too. And I love the intentionality behind all of that.
Well, and things have changed so much too, because to your point, Cyndi, I don't, when we were young, I actually, our son asked us the other day, my husband and I, he's like, well, you guys planned for me and everything. And we both are kind of looking at each other. We're like, no, not really. I mean, there was no, like, we didn't really plan for you. And so it just happened. But you think about it. So I agree with what you're saying there, like the intentionality behind it, but also, there was a time when we would have made maybe poked fun a little bit at, oh, well, you're going to be 60 years old when your child is going to high school. There was a time when 60 was pretty old. 60 today is not what 60 was when we were young. I mean, yes, when our parents, exactly. So I think, the advancements in healthcare and the advancements just in people's focus on taking care of themselves, it does open up the opportunity to start having children later in life than maybe we would have in the past, because you were thinking like, do I really want to be 60, 70 years old, with having teenagers or something? It seemed crazy at the time. It's not as crazy as it once was either. I think that's changed. So
absolutely.
Yeah. And I
crazy
also
to me,
think,
I'd never do it, but I do think,
it's a personal decision.
but I think it's great. Yeah, no,
well,
absolutely.
yes. And I think sometimes it also takes, if you are career driven and you've been kind of living in your little bubble of, okay, I'm just working and working and I have these dreams of, whatever it might be and what you envision. And then something also happens. I've seen this happen to a lot of friends as well, where you also then experience the fragility of life because there's, somebody that you love or care about gets diagnosed with cancer, or you sort of see, what do I want that future life to look like? Do I want to, be in those later stages of life and it's just me and my partner? And then if your partner's not there, just me.
Very true. Yeah.
And I think
No, there's
those kind
something
of
about
things.
family,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, no,
exactly.
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Priya, if you could give a piece of advice to working moms for trying to thrive in both roles, which I know you are, what would it be?
I think a lot of it is really coming back. I feel like this is the thing that I say to everyone, but it does come back to that self-awareness piece of being honest with yourself. Because I think if you're setting expectations for others or setting expectations based on societal norms or what you think your workplace wants, that's when you yourself are not going to be happy. So I think really it's thinking about that self-awareness piece and giving yourself time, because I think that is the key that I needed was patience and time and realizing you don't have it all figured out at the beginning. And it's not going to look the same. It's going to continue to adapt. It's going to continue to evolve as the years go on. And so I think really just being able to say what you want now might not be the same as what you want 6 months from now, 3 years from now, 10 years from now. And that's okay. So I think my biggest takeaway is just being adaptable and being okay with what you truly want deep down inside and not caring what other people think about those decisions you're making.
I love that.
I like that. That's great advice. And I think too, for women to feel empowered to make those decisions for themselves. So if you're not with the right employer, maybe you look for alternatives, as you're thinking about these sorts of things. And I love everything that you just said there, because women for such a long time have allowed other people to make decisions for them, when it was time to have children, when we could do what we could do in the workforce. And because we've had a level of insecurity about our roles in the workforce, sometimes we also felt like we needed to concede just simply because of that fear, like you brought up, that fear of what's going to happen. And I think that when we are empowered and we drive those decisions for ourselves and we feel like it's okay, and if this isn't the right situation, there is another one. And I think that's part of it too, is maybe we felt like we were limited, and we probably were limited by the options that were available. But I think a lot of that has come from female empowerment and women like yourself who are leading the way for these, women who are coming behind us. So
Yeah. And I think there's one other layer that, you know, a totally different conversation, but another layer that I think adds complexity is culture. There are cultural
yes,
pressures that come in depending on how you were raised, whether you're first generation, all of these other
great
things
point.
also, I think, are weighing on so many women around the US in different stages of their life where they don't feel like they can say no because they've watched the sacrifices be made from their community, from their parents, from all of these other
Um,
places that they don't feel like they can say, "No, I don't want that."
And I would
that's
even
fair. That
say,
is.
just coming from a family where my mom was the one who worked so hard for all of us to get to where we are, kind of what you're saying, Priya. I mean, I can honor what you're saying and then take it, thinking on my part, I wouldn't want to let my mom down by not working as
Mhm.
hard. And so there are a lot of preconceived notions just based on where you came from, based on your history.
Such a great point. Yeah. No, I love those for sure. And I do think that, it is important to bring up those cultural aspects behind it all. And Cindy, when you grow up in a home where you have a working mom, a single mom, in many cases as
Yeah.
well, you look at the pressures and the sacrifices, and you do think, gosh, the last thing I want to do is let her down for everything that she did, or to let those women who came before me down. So there are a lot of societal pressures around all of that. There's a lot of pressure on women in general, in my opinion. I mean, I do still think that women have a tremendous amount of pressure that sits on us, and I think we're still trying to figure out, how do we balance all of that, and how do we take control and make sure that we are in control of our lives and our destiny, and it isn't driven by culture or society or these, or even self-imposed pressures that are out there. So
Yeah. Well, this has been an awesome conversation with you, as always, Priya. So thank you so much for coming back. Anything that you would like to
yeah,
leave our audience with today?
Sure. I think, as I continue on my own journey, I've been really excited about this element of community because I felt like when I was going through this, I had a handful of friends that I could rely on, but I know there were so many more people out there. So I am embarking on a new journey of my own personal kind of, experience of wanting to build a community. And so I've kind of coined it the And Life Project.
I love that.
But
I
I
love
really,
that.
yeah, I want to bring, more of these conversations into the forefront around this just being a part of our experience. And it's from all different lenses. I think, we go through it not just when we become parents, but we go through perimenopause, we go through menopause. There's so
Yeah.
many stages, and I think we're silently suffering.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of to the point where I'm like, nope, we need to stop doing
Those
that. We need to band together and we
conversations.
need to just have these conversations out in the open because that's the only way that we're going to be able to take down those barriers of saying that these are limitations and focusing more on the benefits that come from all of the different components of being a woman.
I love
Yeah.
that.
I love that community side of it. I know that's been important to Cyndi and I as we've, that's really kind of like been the catalyst for the Her Resources podcast, is really to think about raising those issues, having open dialogue, but having open dialogue with each other in a community that understands these things, right? Because just like that guest I was talking about who commented on, I don't want to have equality to men. I'm not a man. I want to be viewed as a woman, and I want to have equal and equitable opportunities for who I am. The only way that happens is when we as women do build these communities together. We do lift each other up, and we're there to raise an awareness, not to come out, to your point, and create the other side of that stereotype, which I thought was a really good point. It's not to say, well, we have to have all of these benefits. No, we just have to have equity. And we need to think about, what are the needs of women, what are the needs of men, and let's just make sure that we're providing equitable benefits across the board for both sides of that. So I love the community. That is fantastic.
So Priya, if somebody wants to become a part of your community, how do they get connected with you?
Sure. I'm building it up right now, so please connect with me on LinkedIn. That's my most active channel. Um, that's a great place for me to be able to find like-minded people that I think really want to drive this together. And so feel free to send me a DM. It's Priya Shah Strategist, if you just want to throw that into your browser for LinkedIn. And then, I think other than that, just, I would say connect with me through my website if you're more interested on the business side. But this is really something that I'm really spending a lot more time on, with the focus of knowing I have my clients, but this is really where my passion lies.
Love that. You can tell. Thank you.
You can, yeah. You wear it very well, Priya, and you carry the flag with pride, which is awesome. I'm so glad to see what you're doing, and I'm so glad that Cyndi brought you into our community at the Her Resources podcast, because I think you are very impactful in the messaging that we're trying to deliver out there to our listeners. So yeah.
Thank you both.
Well, and to all our listeners out there, if you like it, like and subscribe. We're on all of the major streaming services out there, so definitely check us out. Cyndi and I are always looking for new connections as well. You can find us out on LinkedIn, and I think that our website may be live soon as well, Cyndi. So we'll have some information out around that too. So
thanks to Logan for putting that together for us.
Thanks to our producer. That's right, LJM Productions. If you're looking for an amazing producer, we know one. So
we know the guy.
But that's right, we know the guy. So well, thanks everyone. Thank you, Priya, for being here. Cyndi, thank you as always. It's such a pleasure to be here and to have these conversations together. And appreciate everything you are both doing.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of the HR Her Resources podcast. We're so happy to have you with us on this journey. Music and production by Logan Misegadis of LJM Productions. We'd also like to thank our intern, Lauren Banas, for creating our logo and supporting our social media postings. If you'd like to connect with Logan or Lauren, you can find their information in the show notes. If you found value in our discussion and think someone else might as well, please follow, subscribe to our LinkedIn, and share with a friend. Until our next episode, please take care and continue to support one another.